I'm Jim Collison and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, a special strengths spotlight on Azusa Pacific's University College, recorded on January 18th, 2017. Strengths Spotlights are live interviews that Gallup conducts with individuals, teams, and organizations who are using the CliftonStrengths Finder and its 34 themes to impact their community and organizations around the world. If you have questions, please email them to us. You can send that email to coaching@gallup.com. And don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com, all one word, for your Strengths Finder resources and training needs. You can also catch all the past Gallup webcasts over at our coaches blog. Just go to coaching.gallup.com. This special edition of Call to Coach will feature Kristen Robertson. She's a student success supervisor with Azusa Pacific's University College in California. Kristen, welcome to Call to Coach.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
We are super glad to have you. I think we scheduled this like back in 2015. It feels like forever since we've had you scheduled. And thanks for spending the time with us today to get this done. Kristen, let's meet you as we get started here. Can you walk us through your top five and then a little bit about your role there at the college?
Sure. So my top five are relator, learner, achiever, developer, and deliberative. And I'm a student success supervisor, primarily working with online adult learners. So non-traditional students, median age, maybe 33, coming back to school after maybe multiple attempts at other institutions, or trying it for the first time after they have maybe raised their family and been in the industry for a while. So really interesting work to do. I do have experience working with traditional, most of my experience is traditional students. So this was a really interesting new journey for me. So my strengths, they work pretty well. The developer has probably been the strongest strength that I've employed between that and learner. And really even relator is really building really deep relationships with these students, because that is something that we've discovered at our institution works very well for them and helps them progress, is when they have a connection to their success coach and they feel like they have somebody that's on their side when maybe they didn't feel like they had that support at previous institutions.
And really clear to separate there. There's a traditional side of the house when we think about 18 to 22-year-old students at Azusa Pacific. And then University College is working with the adult kind of second career, second go around. By the way, that was me. I did 6 years in the military and ended up making my way onto a campus as a kind of an adult learner. And so I appreciate the institutions that do that. You've been there for 4 years. Can you talk a little bit? So how many students do you have in that position, and what's your primary method of kind of interacting with them? The traditional students are easy. They're on campus, they're in dorms, those kinds of things. The adult learners are all over the place, right? Herding cats from that standpoint.
Correct.
So talk a little bit about how that works for you.
Yeah, so I think are maybe around 14 to 1,600 students that we have at our institution. And our method right now is they go through an enrollment process, and then after they go through that process, they're assigned to a success coach. And we probably have about 32 odd success coaches or people in our department that work with students in some capacity. And so the way that we work with them is we support them from beginning to end of their program, whatever they're in. If they're in a certificate program, if they're just here to take one class, or if they're in a degree-seeking program, getting their bachelor's in psychology or management. And so that success coach has a particular roster of students that they support, and they call them and they email them. Those are really the primary modes of communication. Literally, there's sometimes where I don't meet a student until graduation. It's a very odd experience where I've literally walked up to them at graduation. I'm like, is that you, Susan? Yay! You remember me?
Hugs. First time you've seen them, but you know them forever, right? Big hugs.
Right. But that's basically our primary mode is we're on the phone with them, constantly trying to call them, get in contact with them. We'll use Google Hangouts, chats, or do screen sharing if they're having difficulty figuring things out. But a lot of it is very much it's not face-to-face. Very rarely do they come to our offices here and meet with the coach. Most of the time it's over the phone and it's via email that we are connecting with them, because they're also very busy adults. And so that's usually what works best for them instead of having to come in person and talk with the coach.
You've been in that role for 4 years, and yet you just came to campus. I met
Mhm.
you in December when you were here on campus for our training. So you went through an ASC course, right? So our week
Yes.
long or our 5-day ASC course. How did that, what did that give you? I mean, a lot of people kind of think they have to start there, but for you, you've been
Mhm.
doing this a while and then you came to the training. How did that change things for you?
It changed a lot for me because it really gave me a little bit more language about work that I was already doing. And so one of the things that I remembered a lot was, start with talent and end with strength. And so being able to talk about that with my students, and that it's not you get your top five and these are your strengths. Actually, no. For some it may be that these are your strengths, but others you're just in a place of talent and there's still some development that needs to happen. And so being able to work with our students in that process and knowing that it's a process, and that there's time that you need to and energy you need to spend in developing these strengths, and really being able to hone in on what are the specific ways, and resources that we can give our students that are applicable, that are relevant to really help them grow. And so a lot of what I got out of the time in December were thinking about what are specific ways, because strengths to me are very individualized. Even though you can look at the big graphs that tell us the achiever is the top strength for everybody, it doesn't necessarily look like that at our institution. And so what are the things we need to know to help our students be successful? And it will look different, not just for our institution, but then individually. And so using that individualized approach to help students achieve their specific goals was something that really kind of helped reinforce some of the work we're already doing, but then also as a supplement, having some additional resources and language that I can use in my training and development and in my work with students.
Azusa has been a school that has used strengths for a long time, and we go back
Mm-hmm.
to Chip Anderson and his work there on campus.
Mm-hmm.
Even long that predates me by a lot of years here at Gallup. Anything that you learn? I mean, so it's been around a while, but anything like, especially in the kit materials that we got, were there any new aha moments in that you got out of the kit? You're like, oh, I can definitely use this exercise or this. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Absolutely. I think one of the great resources that I got was a lot of the information around values,
Mm.
because for a lot of our students, like strengths feel very foreign. There's these really odd, maybe words that they've never heard before, and they don't quite get them. But to talk about strengths from a place of what do you value, and then being able to make a slower connection to, okay, and this is what achiever means. So if you value productivity, and you really like to-do lists, and kind of talking about the things that you value in terms of your lifestyle and how you run, your business or your family, and then making that transition into a discussion about strengths, is something that I really enjoyed. So I'm actually going to be spending some time revamping our materials to include some information about values. What are just the bare bones values, and what are some of the ways that we can talk about even pairing strengths, which I know that's one of the resources that they gave us that I think Kurt created. And it's something that I feel like would be really useful is let's talk about your achiever and your learner together and how that you can use that to maximize, or to use as leverage in your work. So those are probably two of the things that are really great resources.
Yeah, you talk about values, and we have a set of values cards. Very, very
Mm-hmm.
simple, and there's no magic in them. They're just statements, right? And
Yeah.
you can put those statements on the table, and oftentimes, and I love the way you approach this, that sometimes with students where those themes might seem a little foreign,
Mm-hmm.
starting with values may bring the walls down, right? In other words, I know what my values are. I can, going through these cards and kind of picking them out. We do this sorting technique where you go through the cards, kind of sort them out. Then
Mm-hmm.
you kind of get to your top 3 or top 5 values, whatever, and then
Mm-hmm.
superimpose those values on top of these theme definitions that you've gotten back in your top
Mm-hmm.
5 report, right, or in your insight guide.
Mm-hmm.
And it really brings a richness, almost a 3-dimensional aspect, right, to
Mm-hmm.
the themes. Did you see? Is that when you think about adding values? Is that what you're talking about? That kind of exercise?
Yes, because one of the things that we've tried to share is, we're not just a strengths-based institution. Like we don't only just do strengths. We talk about VIA character strengths. We talk about the values. We talk about all the different resources that come along with having a conversation about strengths. And that's the primary mode, and that's what we have kind of posted everywhere in the office. But we also know that it helps to engage in some conversations about some other things like values, that can help people understand their strengths better.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so I love that approach that you're seeing different ways into it to kind of help the students. From a program perspective, can you kind of just give me a quick overview as a student? What would I expect in the university college there? How would I expect from the beginning to the end to interface with strengths? How does that work, and what are you guys doing to kind of make that a part of the student experience?
Sure. And I would say that's probably another thing that I picked up from the course, and even from the summit that was in July, which was amazing.
We have another one coming. I hope you're going to come.
I'm already registered.
Good. 2017. I'll just remind anyone, CliftonStrengthsSummit.com. February 28th is when the early bird pricing ends. So if you haven't signed up yet, now is the time to do it. But sorry to cut you off there. Had to promote that. Go ahead.
Oh, no, please do. I want to promote it as well. But one of the things that they talk about is it's not just a test, and everybody needs a coach. But what I got out of that was it's not just about taking the assessment. You need a conversation that goes along with it. And so our work is pretty, we have the way our system is set up is we have 8-week sessions. So most traditional campuses are about a 16-week semester. Our semesters are broken up into 2 8-week sessions. So you take 2 classes in 8 weeks, and then you take another 2 classes in another 8 weeks. And that comprises an entire semester. And so every session, or basically, every couple of weeks, we're doing a strengths week in the week 4 of an 8-week session. So as a student, they come in and they are having their conversation with their coach. And in that 4th week, depending on what class they're taking, and a majority of our students are taking our UC 101 Success in the University course, which is basically a first-year seminar course. And when they take that, they are required to buy the StrengthsFinder 2.0 book, take the assessment. They engage in a discussion forum online where they talk about it with their peers. But then they are also required to have a conversation with their success coach. And as a brand new student, they're actually required to have a conversation with their coach the first 8 weeks. So their entire session or the first couple of weeks of the session, depending on their course. But if it's the first year seminar, then they're having a conversation every week. But that 4th week is special. That coach will take that top 5 that the student sends them, and then they talk to them. Let's have a general conversation about your strengths. Let's talk about how you can use it in the classroom, how you can use it professionally, how you can use it personally, and really kind of give some meat to it, because when they see it, it's just the top 5. But then how can you actually use this? And for many of our students, they are seeking promotions. They're in a career change. And so we do have conversations about how they can use those strengths in that place of transition that they may be to help them get to that goal.
Yeah, it's great that you highlight the transition, because that's super important, right? When we think about these are unique situations where it isn't cookie cutter. And I'm not trying to say that traditional students are all the same, right? That's not, but there are definitely challenges when we think about bringing families to the situation and bringing second careers. That's difficult. And StrengthsFinder is really a great way to kind of get to the bottom of some things. So I'm sure some of your coaches do that. You mentioned StrengthsFinder 2.0. Is there a decision why you went with 2.0 as opposed to using the StrengthsQuest book and materials that we generally guide towards universities? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, StrengthsQuest, we actually integrate some of the components of it. So there's a document that I created along with one of our success coaches, and in that document, it includes kind of like almost a cheat sheet for coaches to like quickly gain information about each of the 34 themes. But included in that, when we talk about the academic application, we actually do include information from StrengthsQuest. The only difficulty with StrengthsQuest is not all of it is applicable to the adult learner. So for example, I think like Woo, they talk about go and join the clubs and get into extracurriculars, and we don't have any of that. And so we did pull out information from StrengthsQuest that was applicable for adult learners, but a lot of the other information are things that we've gleaned from StrengthsFinder 2.0 or other resources that we feel like would be the most relevant for our student population.
No, that's really great, by the way, that you haven't tried to do one or the other, but that you've done both and you find the applicable parts. I find a lot of times coaches are trying to jam a square peg into a round hole. And it's like, hey, we've got all these materials that are available for you. Use the ones that work, right? Based on your situation. What do you think when you think about your program? And I think I know what you're going to say, and you might have even said this already, but when you think about the best of your program, like the area that you get the most excited about and you guys think that you do better than anybody else when it comes to strengths, what do you think that spot is? What's the bright shining spot for you guys when we think about what you do for the students?
I think it's that we connect the dots. Like that's the thing that always comes to my mind. It's these aha moments of being on the phone with a student and talking about their top five and helping them make sense of it. Because for some, they take the assessment because it's required. It's an assignment. So that's how you get them to do it, is you make it an assignment. But then you have a conversation with them. I was having a conversation with the student who got her top five. And she said, oh man, I really wanted achiever and learner and all the kind of smart student strengths, And I said, well, one, they're called strengths for a reason. They're all good. And let's talk about your goals. And she eventually wanted to be in counseling. And she had things like empathy and restorative. And I said, actually, your strengths work pretty perfectly with your intended, career goal. And so I think we do that pretty well, where we're able to help them make some connections between your strengths and your goals. What do you want to do? And then let's help you make some connections about how you're wired, and how that will help you eventually achieve the goals that you have and the reason why you even came to our institution.
Yeah, I want to dig in a little bit of that, because I think maybe one of the number one questions I get from our coaches at times is, how do I make that connection between my themes, my top five signature themes, and a career? And that's kind of what I heard you saying in there, right? Do you have any other tools that you use, or what's the path as we think about, hey, I've got this top five, what's the path you want to lead them down to get them to some suggested careers or some things for the future? How do you guys do that?
Well, I think a lot of it is zooming out a little bit, and really just having a general discussion. What are your goals? And we actually, when we first talk with a student, when they're placed on our roster and we have some of those initial conversations, that's one of the very first questions we ask. What led you to University College? And what are your goals? Why are you here? And how can I help you achieve success and to reach some of those goals? And so a majority of the time it's promotion. I'm coming back after raising a family. It's all the kind of the things that we know about our students. And then once we know what their program is, then we're making some further connections there. Okay, so it sounds like you're wanting to get a promotion. You've been working in the healthcare industry for 20 years, but you want to be a supervisor. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your strengths in relation to the work that you're doing right now, and then how you can leverage them to get to the level that you want to. And so a lot of time, it's a lot of asking questions and listening, which I know is a lot of what they drilled into in the Accelerated Strengths course, is doing more listening, less talking, more listening, about their experience, and then helping them get to that place where they're like, oh, okay, I see, I can do this. And so asking questions and getting them to think and come up with some of those solutions, which is what happens, is they'll say, okay, so if I do this, if I maybe get a certificate in this, or maybe I have a conversation with my supervisor, if I sign up for this project because I know that I have analytical skills that department is in need of, and that might be something that's really helpful as they're looking through reports, and that might be something that aids me and not only networking, getting a little bit closer to maybe that promotion that I want when I'm using my skills to help in my company or in my particular role that can get me to that goal that I may have. So a lot of it is drilling down. Let's talk about goals. Let's ask some really good questions.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you on that, because oftentimes I get the sense, I hear from people, I want a A plus B equals C approach. In other words, I just want to plug this in, be able to point them in the right direction. And what I hear you saying is it's really a discussion, right? You want to hear from them. What do you think? And then you're providing that coaching that comes along with it to kind of help steer that conversation. So that's awesome. By the way, I think this is an area, career development is one of the hardest things to do in the world, and just get people into the right spots, doing the right things. Students sometimes have questions. They don't want to make it. They just want to be told sometimes, like, hey, I should do this career, right? Sometimes they get so frustrated, and it really is a great conversation. When you were in the ASC course, you'd mentioned to me in the pre-show that you were doing this with some other folks from other institutions that had come, right? What did you guys talk about? I'm sure you got together and started swapping stories, right? Started talking shop. What kind of things, what do you do when higher ed folks get together? What were the most important conversations you had? What did you glean from that? Did you learn anything from those conversations?
I did. Well, a lot of the talk, I would just say generally when higher ed folks are getting together is we're talking about the state of affairs in higher education, which for us, it's a little bit dire. There are schools that are closing their doors after years of being open, and not just the for-profit sector, but it's schools that have been around for a while. It's the lack of engagement, and we're seeing a different population come to the traditional campus. We're seeing more of the non-traditional students go back to school and less of the traditional age going to school. They're waiting maybe longer to go to campus. And so we were talking about a lot of what those issues are, but talking about career too, because we know that that's really important. Even the traditional age students, I'm coming to college because I want to get a good job. I need to get this degree so I can get a good job and make a lot of money. And so sometimes it's having that conversation, even at the traditional level of, okay, let's unpack that a little bit, because let's make sure that you're in a job that you might actually like, because yeah, you might make a lot of money and then you get burned out or you don't like it. So it's really important to maybe find something that you love and you really enjoy and that's in line with your strengths, that helps you to thrive and that gives you a level of enjoyment. And so we talked a lot about engagement, we talk about career and just the general state of affairs and how might strengths be helpful. Because I kind of have a theory where I feel like there's a lot of people in higher ed who might be in the wrong positions, or they're facing some difficulties in their role because they're not quite wired, or they're having some difficulty figuring out, okay, how do I maneuver in this role when I don't enjoy it anymore, or something completely different, because the tide is changing in higher ed and they're asking for more. It's maybe more of a numbers thing, and we need more students. We need people graduating at higher rates, and that may not be how you're wired. But then how can you use that conversation of strengths to help people overcome maybe those areas that are not as strong, that are maybe in that bottom of that 34 report, and partner with other people. And so even this conversation among us that are in higher ed, how can we connect as just a community of higher ed leaders to help each other in some of these difficulties?
Yeah, it's in pre-show. I also mentioned that I need to probably do in 2017, continue to pull you guys together to have these kinds of conversations. When we think about Call to Coach, we've already done some of these webcasts around this, but we'll continue to do more. Okay, two areas I want to talk about. One is for those coaches who are already in academic institutions coaching. The second one's going to be around for independent coaches who want to get involved. So when you think about advice, the things that you'd learned for folks that are already, maybe they're already in this setting where they're in the career counseling center and they really want to bring strengths into it. It may not be there, or there's some form of it there. What kind of advice would you give to coaches or to individuals who are thinking about doing this, who are already in an institution but want to do more? What kind of advice would you give to them?
Well, one, I would say that there are a number of resources that are in the Gallup Strength Center. And I literally just had this conversation last year with a colleague who does work in career services on his campus. And he asked me, like, well, what would you recommend? And I am immediately pulling articles from, the blog posts and videos. And I said, I think you should start here. I think you need to gather information, gather research and data and information that Gallup has already done to talk about strengths, because you're going to need some buy-in. It can't just be you, but you're going to need some partners and some other folks that will be advocates. And so I usually start there, but also start having a conversation with those other advocates that are on campus, and maybe pulling people from other departments or other areas to talk about it collectively. Because I think sometimes the work of strengths can get stuck in one department or one area when we want to make it a bigger university-wide initiative. But usually that's where I'm starting. I'm starting with some of the research that I see from Gallup, the books, the different blog posts with other coaches. I know the Facebook group has been an amazing place where, you can open up a question on Facebook in the Call to Coach group and just say, hey, I have this question. How are other people using this on their campus? So a lot of it for me has been reading. It's been reading and researching and having good conversations so that I can gather my information. I'm also a learner and deliberative. So that is naturally where I will start, is let me learn some things.
Yeah. And so all those resources we make available, you mentioned the coach's blog, so coaching.gallup.com. We have a Facebook group. That's just facebook.com/group/called2coach, called to coach, if you want to join us there. Open about 7,700 people in that Facebook group, by the way. you can get an answer usually within minutes from a lot of people that is out there. And then of course, lots of information on the Gallup Strength Center. And I always tell people, I remind people, don't forget about Gallup.com. That is our main news site, and a lot of our strengths and a lot of our data is posted on Gallup.com. So don't forget about those. Kristen, any national groups that you're a part of that encourage you to in the walk that you're doing with strengths-based development? Are there any national groups you're a part of that help you with that?
You know what? Sadly, I don't believe that there are. The work of strengths in higher education sometimes feels a little bit small. And that's why going to the summit to me was really important, is that it's not really that small. There are other institutions that are doing it. So I know I've made a commitment that I'm always going to go to the summit. That's going to be, a big part of my professional development. Is to, one, be a part of the conversation, but to also meet other people that are doing that work to hopefully build that network. There is a resource at Azusa Pacific University, and they have a Thriving Conference every year that's put on by Lori Schreiner. And she does this work around thriving and how we can have thriving campuses. And a part of that conversation is strengths. So that is a particular conference that I try to attend every year and have presented in this past year to talk about how we do strengths at UC to get a part of that conversation. And so I know there's some bigger student affairs conferences like NASPA or ACPA, or even a COOI, which is the big housing conference. But I don't see as much conversation around strengths in those organizations, because I think there's some bigger things happening around social justice issues that I think a lot of those conferences are focusing on now. But I would say the strengths could be a part of that conversation too.
Yeah. And no, I didn't set you up for that to say the summit, but we are, I guess I did. We are going to continue to expand the verticals at the summit. And so we'll continue when we think of higher ed, that will be one of those verticals. Industry, of course, there'll be some industry verticals as well as faith in that. And so that we do see as the conference expands, and we're expecting about 1,500 people this year. So we'll double what we did last year at the summit this year. And so we look forward to that. Okay. So question part two for you is, if I was an external coach, how could I help you? Like if I'm out there doing my own thing and I'm thinking of partnering with universities, what can external coaches do to help, or how could they fit into this model, or can they?
I think they can, because one of the things that I'm interested in doing outside of just being a coach in a higher education setting is helping other leaders in the universities and help them as they navigate this kind of terrain of figuring out their own strengths. Because it's not enough like, okay, I can help other students figure it out, but how am I using my strengths in that process? And are there some ways that maybe I'm not being as effective as I can? To help a student come to that place of understanding with their particular strengths because of how I'm wired. And a part of my role is training and development. So I do an orientation for all new staff to talk about strengths, and then also do it for the success coaches. And I have a conversation. One, let's just talk about your strengths, and then two, how you can use your strengths in your work to be successful. And then obviously the conversation of how you're using it with students. And so I think that external coaches can come in and help to support higher education leaders in their efforts. One of the things that we've started doing now, which is work with faculty. They're not always the easiest population to convince of certain things as it relates to strengths. But my institution has just recently made that commitment to, engage faculty and talk about their strengths and how they use it in the classroom and learning, even in an online format. And so I think that outside coaches can come in and really do some consultant work, which is basically what I've had to do in this role, to support them. And then how can they move forward with the information that we have around higher education? The name escapes me, but I know there was a 2-part series of articles that came out last year that was pretty amazing about kind of the roadmap for strengths in higher education. And I use that in my conversations with my strengths committee that I oversee. And it was very helpful in figuring out the path forward. And so I think external coaches using that information in their consultations and their efforts would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I'll remind folks resources. If you go to the coaches blog, go to coaching.gallup.com. There's a search bar there. I just put in higher ed, and we have a lot of resources. including,
Yeah.
we're starting our own Strengths Institute at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and Mark Pogue will be joining me this Friday. So by the time people hear this, that'll have passed. But Mark Pogue will come in. He's the director of the Strengths Institute. Wouldn't you love to have a Strengths Institute at Azusa Pacific? You kind of do, actually. You guys
We
have
do.
been doing it. Yeah, you do. You guys have been doing it well and have been doing it for a long time. But if you head out to our blog, the search is the most underutilized tool that we have out there. I become the search on the Facebook groups, but head out to the coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com, put in higher ed or any other topic that you're thinking of, and we have lots of information for you out there. I'm glad you mentioned a single class, because I actually have a relationship with the university where I just go in and I teach a single class, and it's 50 students, and they buy the codes, and I go in, and for a recruiting standpoint, it's perfect because these are the students I'm looking for. And so they get a chance to interact with me, and I provide StrengthsFinder information for them about their themes. But man, I think that's a gem. In other words, if you're an external coach and you're wanting to work with a university, start with maybe one class, start with one professor or one teacher who's open to that. Find a way to bring that into the organization, and then start working in your higher ed work. Do you think there's a sweet spot of like an external coach where they should go? I mean, a lot career services is one of them, but admissions is another. Is there one place, or do coaches just kind of have to feel out those universities to figure out where that strengths conversation could get started?
Yeah, I think it's really feeling it out, because it kind of depends on who's open, I would say, because it's usually there are certain departments that want to start an initiative. So for us here, Student Success has always had a home for strengths, because that's how we started, and it's our connection to main campus at APU. And so naturally it became a part of our work. But slowly, as I've been here, I've worked towards, okay, how can we move this into different arenas? And so that's where, Strengths Week happened. And that's where having devotions on Monday, because we're institution, and that I asked, can we be one of the people that gives a devotion every single session that talks about strengths, because then that reaches staff and faculty. So I think it's about who's the most open to the conversation and starting there. So for many campuses, it might be career services, because everybody wants to take all the assessments. Most people are, I'll take Myers-Briggs, I'll take the strengths assessment. But then it's being able to follow up with that conversation. So I always feel like career seems like it's a good place. I think academic advising is an amazing place to start. There's a lot of work I think that's happening around that, and things like appreciative advising, which I think Strengths has a home for. But I think it just kind of depends. And when you go to your university, depending on who's calling you, that's usually where you're going to start, and then working on a strategic plan for how you can get other departments involved in the process of creating a strengths-based institution.
If we had people who were watching this video now and wanted to go out and see what you guys are doing, is there a good place online on maybe one of Azusa's websites, or even for what you guys are doing from a university college standpoint, where they could go and just kind of see what you're doing?
You can. So we do have a site. It's a Google site. So I think the address is kind of long. And we're working on maybe morphing it into something that's in our course portal for our online students. But there is a Google site that houses everything that we've done basically for the past, I want to say, almost 3 years, of every single Strengths Week that we've had. So every webinar, every resource we've created, everything that we've ever offered for our students for the past couple of years. And that gives you basically everything that we've done.
Kirsten, maybe you can send that link to me, and we'll put it in the show notes on the coaches blog. So every video that we do has its own post, and we'll include that there in the show notes, so folks can look it up. Anything, when we think about anything else that you wanted to share during our time here that I may not have asked, anything else that you want to throw in here that may give value to the coaches?
Yeah, I think that it's worthy work with students, whether they're traditional or non-traditional. I think as I talk to students, no matter where they're at, what institution they're at, they are seeking. They're wanting to know, what lies ahead for them. They're trying to figure out their life. They're trying to figure out what they want to do. And I always think that Strengths is just an amazing way to start. One of the things that I used to do with when I had a couple more new students is I would leave a message or send an email and say, hey, next week is Strengths Week. We get to talk about how awesome you are and kind of priming them. This isn't just another assessment that you take, but this is talking about how you are naturally wired, and then helping you find a way forward with your goals. There's a purpose with strengths. It's not just another assessment. It actually has purpose to help you figure out what you want to do in your life, personally, professionally, academically, that could really aid in your success. And that's ultimately we want is success for the student. And so I think if people are willing to do the work, there's tons of resources out there. There are other institutions that are doing the work in very different and creative ways. And I think it's worthy to take the time to figure out what's the best place on my campus to start, and maybe pilot a project and see how it works in terms of students' engagement and how it helps them move forward. But it's just really kind of starting, having the conversation, and then building up those resources using what's already out there to create something that works for your specific campus.
Yeah, that's great advice. In a university setting, numbers matter. You alluded to that earlier. Are you guys doing any tracking at the end of the day so you guys kind of know what kind of impact or influence you're having? Or what are you using as a measuring stick to, at the end of the day, smile and say, I'm making a difference?
Right. So we, in terms of the strengths work, we have a Google site. And so that does allow for analytics, which is very key for us. And so our marketing department, which I would say is another thing I would add, is student success. We're not just a silo. We actually work with several departments. And so I have a pretty strong relationship with our marketing department that creates our sites for us, creates images and design and media. I think one of the things I posted in the Call to Coach group was we created a magnet that we sent out to all of our students, because again, all of our students are across the country. And so I think the power of partnership is very key. Find other people to connect with, especially not only because numbers matter, but because so does your budget. And sometimes you may not have the budget to support it, but if you pair and partner with other people, then you can kind of gather your resources that way. But I would say that that's something that's really beneficial to be able to use in that way to help kind of support the program and what people want to do on their specific campus.
No, that's good. Everything from admissions to careers to graduation, right? All those areas matter. Sometimes we try to pinpoint that, or it's only in the career services, or it's only in the freshman class admissions, right? When they come in, they do a strengths thing their first week of school, and then they never see it again, right? When there's lots of opportunities to make an impact. Speaking of everything from A to Z, that's, I think, that's the slogan, right? Azusa is everything from A to Z in the USA. That's how I remember how to spell Azusa, A to Z, USA. And so folks are looking for that if they want to head out on their own. I think it's just, is it Azusa? What would be the main school's website?
The main school, it's apu.edu. Okay. And so we are housed in their website as well. There's a section for University College. So you can actually look at the resources that APU has for traditional students. It's the Noel Strengths Academy, and they have resources. And then University College is a place where you can find resources. And I'll also send you the link that gives you basically our repository where we put everything for all the strengths we've had the past couple years.
No, that'd be great. And I think for parents interested in sending their children to a strengths-based institution, there's a good guarantee that while they're at Azusa Pacific, they're going to run across that more than just a one-time exercise. Or for students in Southern California who might be interested in doing a second career, or from an education standpoint of getting adult learning, you guys have that program that's available, and it sounds like you're very successful. I know you told me this in the beginning, but how many students on the adult side, how many students do you guys service again?
I want to say the number is maybe 1,600. We have some pretty lofty goals because we're growing very fast, but I want to say the number is around that mark. But we've grown exponentially. I've been here for 4 years, and so the first graduating class we had was maybe like under 10. And this past December, we graduated 300 people.
Oh, that's great.
So we're growing pretty big there.
No, that is great indeed. Well, congratulations on that work there. Kristen, thanks for taking the time to be with me today. We know I've wanted to interview you guys for a while, knowing a lot of the work that you're doing, and it's important work that you guys are doing there. So thanks for taking the time with me today, and thanks for the interview.
Thank you.
Hang tight for just 1 second. I'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just gallupstrengthcenter.com. Send us your questions or comments via email if you'd like to do that, or if you have anything you'd like to know. You can send that to coaching@gallup.com, and you can also catch the recorded audio and video of this program, as well as hundreds of additional ones that we have available on just about any topic around coaching. And Kristen alluded to those earlier. They're all on our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. Well, we also want to remind you that the StrengthsFinder app is available for you. Hopefully you guys are using that on campus there for Android and iOS devices both. Just search StrengthsFinder in either one of the stores. It's available for you for free. And the best way to get your top 5 on your phone and have it available for you anytime. I always recommend, Kristen, people take a screenshot of that, make it their lock screen, because we see our lock screen 61 times a day on average. That's what the polling says. And so put it on your lock screen, always have available so you can always remember your top five. We mentioned the Strengths Summit, and if you're available to do that, CliftonStrengthsSummit.com. Again, that is going to be July 17th, 18th, and 19th, and Tom Rath is going to be there this year. We're super excited about that. He's going to come out and be one of the keynotes. Kristen's coming. You should too. And so join us out there. We'd love to have you at our summit. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. We'll look forward to the next Strength Spotlight. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.